There is a particular kind of silence that exists in men's health, not the silence of having nothing to say. The silence of having questions you do not know how to ask, questions that feel too personal, too embarrassing, or too far outside what you imagine a doctor's appointment is supposed to cover. Questions that sit at the intersection of biology, intimacy, and the quiet anxieties that accumulate over decades of navigating relationships without anyone ever giving you a genuinely honest framework for understanding them. I am Dr. John Carter, a urologist and men's health specialist, and today I want to have precisely the kind of conversation that most men never get to have with their physician. This conversation is going to cover intimacy. Specifically, it is going to address 5 common mistakes and misunderstandings that I see men carrying, often for years or even decades, that quietly damage their relationships, their confidence, and in some cases, their health. These are topics that come up in my clinic constantly, in hushed voices, often at the end of appointments that were scheduled for something else entirely, as if the real concern needed to be mentioned almost accidentally at the last possible moment before leaving. That ends today. We are going to address these topics directly, with the scientific honesty and the human respect they deserve. I have been helping men in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond reconnect with their intimate lives and reclaim the confidence that too many of them had quietly accepted as permanently lost. And I want to share something with you before we go any further. Intimacy does not have an expiration date. Passion does not retire at 65. Connection does not diminish because your hair has gone gray or because certain things in your body work differently than they did at 30. What I see consistently in clinical practice is that the men who struggle most in their intimate lives in their later decades are not struggling because of irreversible biological decline. They are struggling because of accumulated misunderstandings, unspoken concerns, and habits of silence that have gradually eroded the trust and openness that genuine intimacy requires. Those things are changeable, right now. Starting with the information in this conversation, let us go through each of the 5 mistakes, one by one. Mistake number 5, believing that your partner's natural fluids are something to be uncomfortable with or, worse, to reject. This is the foundation upon which every other topic in this conversation rests, so I want to address it thoroughly and without any glossing over. Vaginal fluids are not an inconvenience. They are not an indication of poor hygiene. They are not something to quietly tolerate or to react to with visible discomfort. They are a sophisticated, purposefully designed product of the female body, and understanding what they actually are changes everything about how a man relates to them. Biologically, vaginal fluids are produced by multiple sources working in coordination. The Bartholin's glands, located at the entrance to the vaginal canal, secrete a smooth, silky fluid that reduces friction and makes physical intimacy comfortable. The Skene's glands, sometimes referred to in anatomical literature as the female prostate due to their structural and functional similarities to the male prostate, contribute additional lubrication during arousal. And the cervix produces mucus that plays a protective and regulatory role in maintaining the vaginal environment, balancing the microbial ecosystem and protecting against infection. The composition of these fluids is primarily water, combined with amino acids, a range of protective enzymes, essential minerals, and lactic acid. The lactic acid is particularly important because it maintains an acidic pH environment that is actively hostile to many pathogenic organisms. In other words, vaginal fluids are not just neutral, they are biologically protective. They are part of the body's defense system, not something separate from it. Now let us talk about what actually happens in a relationship when a man reacts to these fluids with discomfort, aversion, or visible judgment. The woman experiences that reaction as rejection, not rejection of a substance, rejection of her body, of a part of herself that she cannot change and would not choose to change. And that experience of rejection, even when it is never explicitly discussed, does not disappear. It accumulates. It creates a background of self-consciousness during intimacy, a quiet monitoring of the partner's reactions, a pulling back from full presence and full pleasure in order to manage the anticipated judgment. This dynamic is one of the most common intimacy killers I encounter in my clinical conversations with couples, and it is almost never recognized as such because it is never directly named. The couple experiences the result, a gradual cooling of intimacy, a reduction in frequency, a sense of distance, without ever identifying the specific moment when the dynamic began. The shift that changes this is not complicated. It is a reframing. Vaginal fluids are not something that happens in spite of attraction. They are something that happens because of it. They are the body's physical signal that arousal is present, that trust exists, and that connection is possible. Receiving them as such, treating them as a natural and welcome part of intimate experience rather than something to manage or minimize, transforms the entire emotional register of the encounter. Acceptance is not just emotionally generous. It is physiologically intelligent. When a woman feels fully accepted, she relaxes at a neurological level. That relaxation deepens arousal, improves natural lubrication, and creates the conditions under which intimacy becomes genuinely pleasurable for both people rather than a performance managed around unspoken anxieties. Mistake number 4. Ignoring or misinterpreting natural variations in taste and smell. This is the question men ask me most privately, often at the end of a long appointment, voice slightly lowered, as if the topic itself requires a kind of stealth. The question takes different forms, but it always comes down to the same concern. Is what I am experiencing normal? Is a particular taste or scent something to worry about? And by extension, is my reaction to it something I should be managing differently? The answer begins with biology, and the biology here is genuinely illuminating. Vaginal secretions, like virtually every other biological product of the human body, are not static or uniform. They vary. They vary between individuals, and they vary within the same individual over time in response to a wide range of factors. Diet has a significant and well-documented influence. Foods with high water content, fruits particularly, tend to produce lighter and more neutral flavor profiles. Foods with strong volatile compounds, garlic, onions, asparagus, and red meat among them, can produce more pungent variations. Alcohol and coffee are known to produce more acidic or sharper profiles in multiple types of bodily secretions. Hydration status matters significantly. Well-hydrated individuals produce more dilute secretions with milder profiles. Dehydration concentrates secretions and intensifies their characteristics in ways that have nothing to do with health or hygiene. Hormonal cycles produce predictable variations throughout the month. Around ovulation, secretions tend to be most neutral and least perceptible. In the days surrounding menstruation, a faint metallic quality is common, produced by trace iron compounds, and is entirely normal. After menopause, declining estrogen levels typically reduce secretion volume and can shift the pH slightly, producing a somewhat more acidic profile than before. Medications, both prescription and over-the-counter, can alter the profile of virtually any biological secretion, including vaginal fluids. Antibiotics in particular disrupt the microbial balance that helps maintain the characteristic mild odor of a healthy vaginal environment. What all of this means practically is that variation is the norm, not deviation from it. The mistake is treating any variation as evidence of something wrong or as grounds for judgment. It is the biological equivalent of being surprised that your own body produces different smells in different contexts. You smell different after intense exercise than after a cool shower. You taste different after a morning coffee than after drinking water for several hours. This is simply biology. The situation that does warrant attention is a sudden and significant change that is accompanied by other symptoms, particularly itching, burning, unusual discharge color, or discomfort. That combination of signals typically indicates a common and easily treatable imbalance, such as bacterial vaginosis or a yeast infection. Both are medical situations, not personal failings, and both resolve completely and straightforwardly with appropriate treatment. The appropriate response to noticing a change of that kind is to raise it with care and without criticism, framing it as a shared health matter rather than a personal judgment. This is the difference between a conversation that strengthens a relationship and one that damages it. Judgment has no place in intimacy. Acceptance, attentiveness, and the willingness to address health matters as a team are what build the kind of trust that sustains genuine connection over decades. Mistake number 3. Making assumptions about safety and skipping honest conversations about sexual health. This is the area where silence carries the most concrete and measurable risk. Not emotional risk, physical risk. And I want to be direct about it. The question of whether it is safe to engage in oral intimacy with a partner is one that deserves an honest answer rather than either unnecessary alarm or dismissive reassurance. The straightforward answer is that for partners in a mutually monogamous relationship where both individuals have been tested and are confirmed free of sexually transmitted infections, the biological risk associated with oral intimacy is low. Vaginal fluids are primarily water and protective compounds, and in the context of a healthy, tested relationship, engaging with them carries no meaningful health risk. However, the complete answer includes a set of important qualifications that matter significantly in other contexts. Sexually transmitted infections including chlamydia, gonorrhea, herpes, syphilis, trichomoniasis, and HIV can all be present in vaginal secretions and can be transmitted through oral exposure, particularly when the receiving partner has any breaks in the mucosal lining of the mouth, including small sores, bleeding gums, or ulcerations. The presence of an active infection in one partner creates meaningful transmission risk, regardless of whether that infection is currently producing visible symptoms. Many sexually transmitted infections are entirely asymptomatic in their carrier while remaining fully transmissible. This is not a reason for fear or for avoidance. It is a reason for information and for transparency. The practices that manage this risk effectively are simple and have the significant secondary benefit of building exactly the kind of mutual trust that intimate relationships require to sustain themselves over time. Testing together regularly, ideally twice annually or before any new intimate relationship begins, is not an expression of mistrust. It is an expression of partnership. It is the equivalent of two people who care about each other ensuring that they have accurate information about something that directly affects both of them. Presenting it as an act of shared care rather than a suspicious inquiry changes its entire emotional meaning. Using appropriate protective barriers in new or non-exclusive relationships reduces transmission risk substantially for the most common ST is and is simply the responsible standard of care. The mistake that creates the most risk in this area is not ignorance. It is the assumption that the absence of visible symptoms means the absence of risk. It does not. The only way to have accurate information about STI status is through testing. Everything else is assumption, and assumptions, in the context of sexual health, have consequences. Mistake number 2. Allowing embarrassment or discomfort to create silence where communication should exist. I have sat with couples in my clinic where the distance between them, the subtle withdrawal, the reduction in frequency and spontaneity of intimacy had nothing to do with declining desire or changing biology. It had everything to do with a question that was never asked, a concern that was never raised, a change that was noticed by one partner and never mentioned because it felt too awkward or too risky to bring up. The conversation never happened. The concern accumulated, the avoidance grew, and by the time they arrived in my office, both people were carrying the weight of a dynamic neither of them fully understood. This is one of the most common presentations I see, and one of the most preventable. The biology of human bodies is dynamic. After menopause, estrogen levels shift, and the characteristics of vaginal secretions change. After illness, after significant dietary changes, after starting or stopping medications, things change. The body is not static. It responds to everything happening in and around it. Changes in intimate physiology are not evidence of something going wrong. They are evidence that the body is doing what bodies do, adapting continuously to changing conditions. When those changes go unacknowledged because neither partner feels safe enough to mention them, they become the silent source of growing distance. The partner experiencing the change feels unnoticed, or worse, feels that the other person has noticed but is too repelled to mention it. The other partner notices the growing distance and interprets it as rejection or loss of interest. Neither interpretation is accurate. Both feel real. The antidote is communication conducted with kindness, with genuine curiosity, and with the explicit framing that what is being raised is a shared concern rather than a personal criticism. In practical terms, this can be as simple as suggesting a shared shower before intimacy, framed as a sensory and connective experience rather than a hygiene correction, or encouraging better hydration as a shared health habit rather than a targeted suggestion, or simply acknowledging openly that things change over time and that navigating those changes together is part of what a lasting relationship actually looks like. The willingness to have these conversations honestly, without the pretense that everything is always perfect, is one of the most reliable predictors of relationship longevity and intimate satisfaction that I have observed across years of clinical work. Silence protects nothing. It simply delays the conversation while allowing the distance it creates to compound. Mistake number 1. Underestimating the extraordinary power of complete and unconditional acceptance. This is the most important point in this entire conversation. Everything else builds toward it. When a man brings genuine, unconditional acceptance to his intimate relationship, when he communicates through his behavior, his responsiveness, and his willingness to engage fully with every aspect of his partner's body, including the aspects that feel unfamiliar or that cultural messaging has taught him to find uncomfortable, he provides something that cannot be replicated by any other means. He provides safety. And safety, in the context of intimate relationships, is not a passive baseline. It is the active precondition for everything else that matters. For deep arousal, for genuine vulnerability, for the kind of connection that does not diminish with time but actually deepens with it. Biologically, the relationship between emotional safety and physical arousal is direct and measurable. The parasympathetic nervous system, which governs the rest, relaxation, and physiological arousal states, is activated most fully when the body perceives that it is in a safe and trusted environment. The sympathetic nervous system, governing alertness, self-monitoring, and stress response, actively suppresses arousal. A woman who is monitoring her partner's reactions to her body, managing anticipated judgment, or holding back from full presence because she is uncertain of how she will be received, is operating in a partial sympathetic state. The depth of arousal available to her is limited by that monitoring. When a man creates an environment in which none of that monitoring is necessary, when his acceptance is so clear and consistent that there is nothing to manage and nothing to protect against, the body responds. Arousal deepens. Lubrication increases. Physical pleasure becomes more accessible. And the emotional experience of the encounter shifts from performance to genuine connection. This is not metaphor. This is the direct physiological consequence of psychological safety. Beyond the immediate physical benefits, complete acceptance has a cumulative effect on how a woman experiences her own body over time. Many women carry years of quiet shame about aspects of their physical selves, accumulated through cultural messaging, through previous relationships, through the thousand small signals that bodies are somehow insufficient or in need of improvement. When a partner consistently communicates, through behavior rather than through words alone, that her body is not just tolerated but genuinely welcomed in every particular, that accumulated shame begins to dissolve. What takes its place is a quality of embodied confidence and ease that transforms everything about how she shows up in the relationship. And here is what I want you to hear directly, as a physician who observes the downstream effects of intimate relationship dynamics on overall health outcomes. Men in relationships characterized by this kind of acceptance report better sleep, lower stress hormones, greater life satisfaction, and meaningfully better physical health markers across the board. Genuine intimate connection is not a peripheral luxury. It is a health variable. Let me close with a practical framework that you can begin implementing immediately. First, have the health conversation. Suggest testing together, framed explicitly as partnership, as a shared investment in your mutual well-being. Twice annually is a sensible standard for any sexually active adult. Approach it as something you do together, not something you request of the other person. Second, develop the habit of attentive and non-judgmental awareness. If you notice changes in your partner's body, respond with curiosity and care rather than with visible reaction or silent avoidance. Suggest a shared shower as an act of connection. Encourage hydration as a shared health habit. If you are concerned that something might warrant medical attention, raise it with gentleness and frame it as a team matter. You are on the same side. Third, practice deliberate acceptance. Not as a performance or a discipline you impose on yourself, but as a genuine reorientation of how you think about your partner's body. Her individuality is not a flaw to be managed. Her natural biology is not something to be navigated around. It is the authentic expression of a particular human being who has chosen to be vulnerable with you. That is worthy of full acceptance. The men who experience the richest and most sustaining intimate lives in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond are not the ones who have found pharmaceutical shortcuts or maintained some idealized physical standard. They are the men who have learned to bring genuine presence, genuine curiosity, and genuine acceptance to their intimate relationships. Men who have let go of the embarrassment and the silence and the accumulated misunderstandings and replaced them with honest, kind, informed engagement. That is available to you right now, independent of your age, your health history, or whatever dynamics have characterized your intimate life until this point. Passion does not expire, and neither should you. This is Dr. John Carter. I will see you in the next one. Sonnet 4.6. Low.